y'all having fun yet? Yeah, it's been a good day, huh? Man, I have the tremendous joy of pastoring at what I believe is one of the greatest churches under the sun. It's called the Austin Stone Community Church, and it's right here in Austin, Texas. And much of our journey as a church has been transitioning a large church to become a church full of missional, incarnational communities. And along the way, we've noticed something very peculiar about us and the people that we lead. You see, we have a propensity to adopt new language. We tend to be very, very slow at actually changing our behaviors and our practices. And for those of you that are in a situation trying to lead people to a new way of acting, you're with me on this one. It is incredibly difficult to help people understand how to change the way that they act. So at the heart of really what we are trying to accomplish within the body of the Austin Stone is to teach people to think and act like missionaries, to think and act like people who are on the mission of God. And so for us, we have to define what is a missionary. So we've come up with this statement that a missionary is someone who sacrifices everything but the gospel for the sake of the gospel. I'm going to say that one more time. A missionary is someone who sacrifices everything, your preferences, your time, your money, the things that you love to do, everything but that cherished gospel for the sake of the gospel. So for this talk, I want to share with you how, maybe a little bit of a tool of how we're trying to train people to think through that lens. And I'm going to use community, just what we think about community to help you think through and understand what we're teaching people and how maybe they need to change not just their ideas, but their behaviors. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a little conversation with one another. You're not going to talk to me, just think in your brain, because if we all talk together, it get a little weird and awkward. So I want you, as I ask a question, to answer it in your minds, okay? So I want to tell you what the people in our church tend to think about community in response to these questions. We're going to use 4 questions. Where, when, what, and how. Where, when, what, and how. So first question, actually first 2 questions. Just think of maybe the average person in your church at this point. Where do they think community happens? And when does it happen? You guys got that spot maybe in your mind right now? I've done this exercise several times, and there's always 2 places that come into people's minds when I ask this question in our church. The first is community happens on Sunday morning in our worship services. The second is that community happens midweek sometime. If you're a really great Baptist, it happens on Wednesdays, right? I mean, this is when we do community, but the predominant viewpoint of community is that is an event that I attend. It's a place that I go, a particular day of the week. Let's go ahead and enter into that experience. Most of us have probably participated in some kind of small group at this point. If you're in this room, you've probably kind of gone through that. So I want you to just go ahead and get your mind like you're walking into somebody's house, the door is just open for you. You probably got handed like a red plastic cup full of Fanta or something you drank in like 2nd grade. You pick up your little paper plate that has some crappy cheese cubes on it and some Ritz crackers, and then you proceed into small talk, right? And what is it that you do for the rest of your time in that environment? Most people are thinking about, we're going to do one of 2 things. We're going to talk about ourselves, or we're going to talk about the Bible. That's the predominant framework of what people think happens when we're in community. We talk about God, and we talk about His Word. Those are the things that we actually spend time doing. So last question. You're in that living room, right? You're kind of hanging out. You've got your little paper plate there. What does the room look like? What does it look like? You've probably got a couch like pushed up against one wall, maybe some folding chairs out here, and if like you're super godly, you've got that extra chair set aside for the person that you're supposed to invite to the group, right? It's sitting there waiting for somebody to fill that seat. But we sit in a circle. We talk face to face. That's how we actually interact as a community. What I want to do is contrast that. Remember, we're trying to be missionaries, so we need to ask the same question. What do the people in our city think of when they think of community? What is their worldview, their paradigm that they're thinking through when you just ask, hey, what do you think of community? So let's ask those same 4 questions. First and foremost, where do you think they think community happens? Sports bar. That's good. Everybody always answers bars the first time. I don't understand why, but lots of people hang out in bars, but they also hang out in other places, okay? No, so let's not think about just maybe the average social drinker, but what about moms? Like, where do moms spend time? They're in parks with their little kids, trying to get them something to do so they can have a conversation for 5 minutes. You know, where do young professionals in your city hang out? They're probably going to a happy hour after work, and they're going to concerts on the weekends, right? They're going to places that are in the culture. They're going to these places. Where do 50-year-olds hang out? I have no idea. I mean, I still got some work to do and some learning to do, I guess. So, where do they hang out? They think about places that are in culture. They go to places typically not inside of their home. Typically not inside of their home. They're engaging somewhere outside of their home. Okay, when do they gather? When do the people of your city gather? How many of them set up standing dates every Wednesday night? Very few of them. They gather when is convenient for their schedule. They gather at places that they enjoy doing and when they can actually do them, right? This is where and when they're hanging out. Now, let me ask a question. What do they talk about? What do the people of your city talk about? The people of Austin love to talk about the food here. It's amazing. I hope you guys enjoyed some of it during our break. The people of Austin love to talk about being an active and healthy person. They love to talk about how we're saved by dieting. You know, I mean, this is the culture of our city. You see, they talk about things that are not them, by and large. Especially when you're introducing someone or you're being newly introduced to someone, much of what you talk about are the things that you love or the activities that you do or the work that you have. Your conversation is defined by other talk. It's defined by talking about people and things that are going on in your life. And then last question, when they think of community, how do they gather? Have you guys ever thought about this? What's the picture that you get when these people gather? Do they gather in a circle? No. I mean, if you're at a concert, you're like crushed up, you know, side to side with one another. But by and large, what you're doing is walking alongside of one another for a common activity, okay? So these are the 2 paradigms. You've got community as we typically see it in church and community in your city. And we went ahead and drew it for you. So please excuse my handwriting. It should come up on the board. And if it's not, okay, it looks like it's broken. So picture it in your minds then, all right? There we go. It's up. There we go. So we've got Christian community and non-Christian community. I want to ask you a question. What do you notice about these things? They are fundamentally different than one another, aren't they? You see, I think in many ways we try and invite people in our cities into forms and things that we do that are totally inconsistent with the lives that they lead. So let me go back to this idea of a missionary. Who are you expecting to be a missionary if all you do is these things? Who are you expecting to be the missionary? You're expecting somebody who has no hope of salvation to go to places that are uncomfortable going. You're expecting someone who doesn't have the Holy Spirit of God in them to adapt their schedule to yours. You are expecting them to learn a new language and way of interacting. You're expecting them to adapt their entire culture. You see, as we worked through this at the Austin Stone, we realized so much of the forms that we had were not accomplishing the mission of God. We had great intentions of being a missional people, but our forms contradicted our mission. So, what do you do about that? much of what we have spent the last few years working on is figuring out ways that we can gather together in new and creative expressions that allow us to land where our city is. So we're actually acting like missionaries. Last question. If all we do is these things, right? If all we do is gather in the ways that we have always gathered, who are you expecting to be more like Jesus? Are you expecting the covenant people of God who've been given the glorious gospel and the power of the Holy Spirit to go and act like missionaries? Or are you expecting your city, who has no hope, to be a missionary people? My friends, I pray that we would learn that we have to lead not only with vision, but tangible practices that empower the people of God to go live out their faith in everyday life. So I pray that we have boldness to preach the gospel of Jesus and to demonstrate it tangibly in our cities. Thank you guys so much.